Welcome to STEAM Powered, where I have conversations with women in STEAM to learn a little bit about what they do and who they are. I'm your host, Michelle Ong. My guest today is Rebecca Wheadon. Rebecca is Site Entity Leader for the Murchison Radio-astronomy Observatory at the future site of the Square Kilometre Array telescope. Join us as we talk about the SKA, the Australian Square Kilometre Array Pathfinder, or ASKAP, and her love of cycling. Hello, Rebecca. Thank you for joining me today on STEAM Powered. It is amazing to have you on and speak to you about all the cool stuff that you're working on right now.
Thank you, Michelle. Great to be here.
Well, we met working call center at an ISP, so that was fun. How did you get from, doing, customer support way back then to, working now at the SKA and, at the Murchison Radio-astronomy Observatory?
That's a great question. Sometimes I actually ask myself the same question. So working with the ISP, I think, was a really, really important basis, as I'm sure you'll agree, for understanding communication with people and customers and all those kinds of things. And I was really fortunate actually working with the ISP to be picked up by a project group there when we started doing some acquisitions of other companies. And it was from there I had the basis to learn the basis of project management. So in hindsight, that was a huge opportunity for me. And unfortunately, I was made redundant from that role. But it turns out that was one of the best experiences of my life, actually. Because from there, I picked up a role back in the days when jobs were advertised in the newspaper for acquisitions in telecommunications. So it's not really a direct link, it's kind of a sideways link, but they are related. And I started to do some commercial negotiation and acquisition for Telstra, big telecommunications company, for the delivery of their 3G at that time, their 3G network. I'm giving away my age now. So you know how we, when you have your mobile phone towers, there's often a lot of resistance to those kinds of things, and community sometimes not so forthcoming with the desire to have those in their backyard. So that was me. That was my job, to actually go in and handle those negotiations with the public and with the councils, and it kind of grew from there. So the journey through to the SKA, it's actually from there. You can see it's actually not that big of a leap. So working on the telecommunications, I ended up managing a group that did the engineering of all of the designs for those communication networks as well. So it just grew from doing that single role through to managing the team that did the larger aspects of all of the network design. And so SKA being a big radio telescope.
Yeah, not really that much of a leap.
Yeah. So they're kind of it's an unusual journey, but they're quite related when you step back and look at it in that way. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. So, what drew you to wanting to work, on the SKA? Like it's a massive project, huge undertaking. What attracted you to wanting to be involved in it?
I heard about the SKA first in my own just research, reading online articles and what have you about this massive project that was coming. I think it was the early 2000s I first heard about it, and it was a little bit more than a concept at that stage. In fact, it had a different name way back then, and it was it's just the idea of the world's largest radio telescope was something which it's mind-boggling to me, sort of to understand that this was going to be happening here in Australia as a potential. Because at that stage, there were still many, many countries in the running to be the host of the SKA. And it's actually a shortlisting process over a number of years. And at that time, the company I was working with had an existing relationship with CSIRO. And I just put my hand straight up in the air, and I'm like, whatever I can do to get involved with this, I want to do it, and we were really lucky that CSIRO, being the Commonwealth Science Agency, they were tasked with putting together Australia's bid to become the host of the SKA. And I initially ended up helping out with that bid. So it's actually nothing to do with the actual infrastructure of the project or what have you. It's and everything to do with responding to the bid. It was huge. I think it was multiple archive boxes because everything had to be printed in colour and bound and boxed up
Wow.
and shipped to them. So it was it was a very formal, very detailed process that we went through. And we were ultimately successful with Australia becoming the host country. So from there, we had, I think you're about to have an extra, sorry.
That's okay.
That's George.
Hi, George.
So from there, we had a lot of work to do in demonstrating that we could prove that we could make radio astronomy work in Australia. And it was from that we needed to build ASKAP, which is the Australian SKA Pathfinder, which in itself is a wonderful radio astronomy project. But that was actually our demonstrator, the clue's in the name, Australian SKA Pathfinder. So to demonstrate that we could actually make this work. And it was really from there, once we had been ultimately shortlisted down to between us and South Africa, that we went ahead with the ASKAP design, and the company I was working for was involved in the infrastructure design of that. And I put my hand straight up in the air, said, I want to be involved in that. And I ended up project managing a large chunk of that. So it's kind of just grown from there.
Did you have to bone up on any of the science and, the details of the infrastructure before you actually got into it?
I mean, project management as a whole is a transferable skill set, and it's less about having the technical now so much as it is being able to. I call it being an interpreter more than anything. So if you have a set of technical requirements, you need to be able to deliver on those technical requirements, but in a human way. So you might end up being the go-between between the scientists and the engineers, for example, which is the role that I ended up playing. So obviously it helps to understand what you're talking about. And what was interesting about the ASKAP infrastructure and indeed the SKA infrastructure is the electronic equipment. So it's located out in remote Western Australia because there's nothing out there. It's one of the most radio quiet places on Earth. Really, really quite fascinating. But when you're going to go ahead and put a high performance computing center out there, it contradicts itself. It becomes its own source of interference. Yeah. So what's unique and special about the infrastructure is the need for it to be shielded so that you can not interfere with your own receivers, which is effectively what was cool about it. Yeah. So it was unique. So a lot of the aspects of the engineering attached to the infrastructure is not that unique, but the way that they're applied in this way really is quite special.
That is very amazing. So how much of that infrastructure is already set up and how much is there to go?
That's a great question. So a lot of the people think that ASKAP actually is the SKA. It's absolutely not. The ASKAP was, like I said, indicated it is a wonderful radio astronomy instrument in its own right, but it's there, it exists, but the SKA itself has not commenced construction. So we're still we're effectively looking to start letting contracts for the SKA around the middle of next year, which is what we will call the commencement of construction. So nothing exists out there at the moment, not for the SKA. We do have there's a couple of stations, they're called, of the antenna prototype that's likely to be used. But other than that, that's it. SKA does not yet exist in Australia, just the prototypes. Yeah. So there's a lot to do.
Goodness. So what would be the potential applications of having the SKA finally complete?
That is the ultimate question. I think one of the things which is unique about science of this nature is the accidental applications that will pop up along the way. And that's what's really neat. So not only are we going to effectively force the progression of the way we deal with big data, not just in Australia, but all around the world, how we process and store and deal with that data. But the potential for additional applications that will come from the development of that technology. So, for example, some of the applications attached to the ASKAP technologies that were developed for that particular receiver now have potential in medical applications, for example. So that's certainly from the technical aspect. From the science aspect, I mean, your guess is as good as mine. I mean, Lord knows what we're going to find. Of course, I mean, we understand what we hope to find. I mean, we may well prove, the existence of dark matter, for example, or prove Einstein's theories or otherwise. The origins of the Earth, and of course, things that people get most excited about is the potential for discovering other life.
Wow, the universe is the limit.
Yeah. So we don't know. We don't know, but half of what's exciting is finding out.
It is. That's amazing. And yeah, just thinking about the amount of data that's actually involved in this, like the scale of this is magnitudes above, what I can possibly fathom in terms of, processing power, storage, transmission. Like it's ridiculous. Is the technology being used all still existing stuff, or are things being developed to be able to handle the magnitude that you'll be getting in with all this information?
I remember when we first started talking about the processing of the data attached to the SKA 6 or 7 years ago, even we just couldn't fathom how that was going to work. I mean, we do have the Pawsey supercomputer here in Perth, and it's still in its own right is a wonderful what a wonderful facility to have here in Perth. Nonetheless, we were effectively the amount of processing power can be cost prohibitive, of course, because you're not just talking about the processing, you're talking about the power, you're talking about the cooling, all of those aspects, which are very, very expensive. But you've probably also heard of Moore's law, whereby over time the cost of these components and these aspects also becomes cheaper. So there was an element attached to the development of the SKA that obviously required Moore's law to catch up. But as mentioned before, it's kind of circular in that we're pushing the limits by the need to actually develop additional, like the processes, for example, needed to be developed. So yeah, it's a bit of both actually. It's a bit of both, but I think ultimately there's never going to be a good time to build it. It's going to be, but now we're in a place now, especially with you've got the addition of cloud storage or cloud computing as an option and all those kinds of things as well, which make things quite different from where we were kind of 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's just having to see where the technology is by the time you get to where you need it to be.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, good. Yeah, it's a good point.
So, as your role as site entity leader for the Murchison Radio-astronomy Observatory site, what does that involve?
I know it sounds a little bit like I'm a mystic, doesn't it? I did say it was one of the most nondescript job titles I think I've ever had. Effectively, as the site entity leader, I effectively run the observatory. Everything but the telescopes is effectively the way to think of it. So out there at the moment at the MRO, obviously we have ASKAP, as mentioned before, which is the 36 12-metre dishes, which is, again, a wonderful telescope in its own right. We actually have other occupants as well out there. So we have Curtin University, have Murchison Array, MWA, and we also have this other little occupant called Edges, which is Arizona State University. So we actually have other occupants already. And then obviously the SKA is coming. So when we talk about the MRO, it's not just the SKA site. There's other people out there, or other instruments rather, out there as well. So the best analogy I can give you is if the MRO were a Westfield, I become the centre management effectively. So so the SKA is, it might be a Maya, and then ASKAP might be a DJ. So those kinds of things, and understanding that each of those occupants have requirements that need to be met and managed. I'm responsible for keeping the site radio quiet. So there's a lot of complexities attached, as you can imagine, with what's unique about that site is that it is radio quiet, but we also have to keep it radio quiet. So when somebody goes out there and starts with their angle grinder, for example, off me one, so those are the kinds of things that actually need to be managed really carefully. So it's effectively everything but running the telescopes is ultimately what I'm responsible for.
Yeah, that's nuts. So because you are going to be having to build additional infrastructure and, the tenants coming and going, like doing whatever they need to do, how do you maintain the radio quietness when there's so much activity happening?
Yeah, that's another great question. So there's multiple ways you can do that. Some of them cost more than others.
Of course they do.
So, for example, I mentioned earlier, we do have the High Performance Computing Centre out there already, which is a fully shielded building. So one of the ways you can achieve radio quiet is by shielding effectively everything so that the radio signals can't get out. Now, that's obviously a very expensive way of dealing with someone with an angle grinder, which is not really practical. The other way you can deal with it is actually by distance. So wherever we can, we do whatever we can to make sure that the construction activities will be undertaken in such a way that it doesn't interfere as much as possible. What's going to happen with the construction period is going to be very, very difficult to not interfere during the day. But certainly at night, for example, you're going to have a big construction camp out there. So what we'll do is locate them as far away as practicable such that they're not interfering with the observing of the other occupants as best we can. It's one of those processes that we're working through at the moment. It is a complex one.
Because, they'll be recording at all times as well. So it's having
Sure.
to coordinate all of that and schedule it. And yeah,
That's right.
Quite the undertaking alone.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, it is.
Oh, goodness.
Well, I'm here.
So, yeah, that's nuts. And, the SKA is, there's, you mentioned, 15, 16 different nations involved. So how do you coordinate that kind of level of participation?
Well, luckily for me, that's not me. I'm one very small cog in a very large machine there. So all of the countries have we work through a central organisation called the SKA Organisation, which is based in Manchester. So the SKA has its own project team, effectively, that are set up to manage the various streams attached to the SKA. So the collaboration over the past, what are we now, 2020, so over the past 6 years has been vast. I've never worked on something so complex in my life. In a previous guise, I was still working on the design of the infrastructure, and now I'm working on the management of the site. So I have had two different roles now attached to this project.
Yeah.
So within the SKA organisation, within Manchester, it was up to them effectively to herd the cats. And the SKA project was broken down into various elements. So as I mentioned, I was the Australian infrastructure design project manager. So I had one element. And then there was other elements, for example, the design of the signal data processing was an element, for example. And then the AIV, the Assembly Integration Verification team, was another element. So everybody had their own streams, and they all developed their design in accordance with the design guidelines, which were put out across everybody. And then you developed your bit, and it was all. We had to go do a big presentation, multiple presentations actually, for preliminary design and detailed design to a committee within Manchester. And they approved your design or otherwise. And then we set about doing the difficult task of actually now putting those things together. Now there's still an element of that happening right now. It's called the bridging phase, whereby we go through all of the project deliverables that have been now completed, and now looking for the gaps. Are there gaps in the scope? Are there gaps in the interfaces? Are there gaps in the cost or the time? Those kinds of things. Are there overlaps? So that in itself is a huge undertaking, and that's still happening right now. So, like I said, I'm a very small cog in a very large machine there. It's been a huge undertaking.
Wow. So when you were involved in your role project managing the design infrastructure, what did that involve?
As it sounds, so there were a set of well, there's always, as any project manager, there's always multiple considerations: design, cost, risk, and then obviously the deliverables of the requirements, the specifications that needed to be met. So we had quite a large number of specifications that had to be met. But as I mentioned earlier, when we were talking about the need for Moore's law to catch up, we were designing infrastructure that was in parallel with an antenna design that we did not yet have. So those two things don't quite match up. So
Yeah.
we had to come up with a way to be clever in that our design had to be readily changed. We could scale up, scale down, modular, effectively, which is ultimately what we did. So we had to design a new high performance computing centre, which is significantly larger than the ones in existence. This one's about 1,500 square metres. But we weren't quite sure how many racks had to go in it, and therefore how much power was going to be required, how much cooling was required, what have you. So we came up with a modular design, which meant that you could do the building in two halves. So you think at least at the very least you put in the first half, and if you need to, then you can start dropping in additional modules. So there's additional complexities, of course, attached to construction out in the outback as well, because of the need for clean welds, all those kinds of things. So the modular approach was the most practical. So you design construct as much of it off-site as possible, then pop it on the back of a truck, and then you truck it out there, and then you put it together like a big IKEA project. And thank God that's me. So yeah, it really has been, and it's interesting to talk about it now in hindsight, what a journey it's actually been. It's been huge. It's a huge undertaking.
So was that a multinational collaboration, or was it still like domestic teams working on that?
For the infrastructure element, we were quite lucky in that the infrastructure element was predominantly handled by Australia, obviously with inputs from Manchester. But there were a number of other elements that had collaborations with universities or other institutions from all around the world. So, they'd be on their 2 a.m. meetings because they had to meet with Canada or what have you. So we were actually, we were very, very lucky. Some of those consortiums were huge. But for infrastructure, we were quite lucky, yeah.
Yeah, pretty insane. And you also mentioned that you're now taking a unit in astrophysics. So why?
Week one, I was feeling, what it would. I'm feeling this. I can do this because I thought it would be good. Because part of my role, obviously managing the MRO, has a huge aspect of stakeholder engagement, stakeholder management. So it might not just be the occupants on site. It might be our local our neighbours, our local council, state government, through to federal government, through to some of the international teams. But people also want to know about it. They want to know what it is and why it is. And I'm not a scientist, but I have to do a lot of talks and I have to engage with the community a lot. So I thought, you know what? I know about the infrastructure. I'm going to go learn about the science. And it seemed like a genius idea at week one.
Brilliant.
And then by week two, I had a bit of a cry. Sorry, Dr. Dragansky. I'm sorry about that. But you know what? I can do this. I'm not naturally gifted at this stuff. The maths is pretty mind-boggling, but I think by doing it, it gives me a new appreciation for what it is that we're actually looking to achieve.
Yeah.
And it's been I'm going to say I'm over halfway now, and I'm passing. I got 98% of my tests last week. So
very nice. Well done.
So every little step that I take forward in this, so it's a huge achievement for me, because I'm not gifted. I'm not a mathematician. I'm not a physicist. I'm not a scientist. But to me, it actually feels like a little win every week. I feel like I've achieved something, which is actually really nice. But ultimately, it will help. It will help. I'm sure it will. It does. Having an appreciation for the magnitude of the maths really puts a different spin on when I talk about it and what I understand about it. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is amazing. I mean, you say that it's not kind of your area, but I was reading one of your other interviews and profiles. You were programming on your little Amstrad when you were little.
Yeah, again, you're giving away my age. Oh, far out, man.
That's all right.
So so being a gamer back in the olden days when Jesus was a boy was not about being able to hook up online to some fully immersive experience. It was all the text based the text-based games, and worse, a lot of those you actually had to write yourself. So
Yeah.
so every couple of months, I couldn't. I was only a kid, so I couldn't tell you the frequency, but I'm going to say quarterly based on the size of the book. Amstrad would release this book like an encyclopedia of all of these games that you would have to code yourself, and they were text-based adventure games. So that's what I did. So I wouldn't say again I was gifted at it, but I think it was
Needs
again it
must.
was I know it was it's a needs based exercise. But I think for my mum it was probably, in hindsight, it was a way for her to spend time with me, because she would sit there and we would do that together, which as an adult I can see that that's actually kind of cute, right? That's
Yeah,
sweet.
it is.
But that's what I did. You wanted a game, you had to code it yourself. So that's what I did. So yeah, it's a different world now.
It is. Like that didn't attract you to, pursuing that further?
No, not really. I mean, I've had a go at it. I find with coding, it's similar to maths actually. When I see it written, I understand it, but it's a different thing to write it yourself. So
Yeah, it is.
I know that you're a programmer, and I'm continually amazed and impressed by the way that you can just magic up a solution to something. You just you write that stuff. It's incredible. And it's the same with the maths as well. It's another language. It's literally another
It
language.
is.
And yeah, I think that's the best way I can describe. I can read it. It's another thing to write it. It's not my thing. And I'm at the point in my life where, you know what, I'm not going to force it. I'm okay with not being able to write it, but I think just being able to read it, I think, is helpful in itself.
That's pretty cool.
Mm.
Yes.
Thanks.
Moving on, like we're already talking about, all your other interests. So we'll start continuing on with that line. So what is the interest or hobby you have that is most unrelated to your work?
I think you know the answer to that, Cheryl. I'm a track cyclist
Yes.
as well. So I'm a track sprinter. So yes, so that's the one in the velodrome where they ride around really slowly, the cat and mouse one.
Yeah.
So I still compete as well, and that takes up a lot of my time, and I'm sore most of the time. So there's a lot of gym attached to that, a lot of training attached to that. But
Yeah.
it's a really cool sport. It's got a great community. It's one of those sports that you can do as an individual but still be together, and that suits me. It's just really cool.
I know a lot of people have gotten into cycling, but how did you get into velodrome?
I specifically remember watching Anna Meares in Athens, so that must have made it 2004. And I wasn't a cyclist at all at that stage. I didn't even have a road bike or anything, but I was absolutely besotted with how exciting it was to actually watch that sport. It was just completely captured me. And I didn't even know how to start. And to be honest, back then I was actually too embarrassed to find out as well. So my partner at the time, I made him go into a bike store and ask, how do you do that? How do you get started? Now, at that time, they were not particularly kind about it, because they said, well, she doesn't even have a road bike, so, can't help you, which is a shame, because in actual
Oh,
fact, track cycling is for everyone. And
yeah.
you can go to a come and try day and hire a bike and have a go, but that information was not given to me. But I did pick up road cycling at that time, and my best friend knew she was also a road cyclist, that I really wanted to try this thing. And I've got the build for it as well. You know, a lot of the track cyclists, they're nuggets, you know, with the strong sprinters, where they're bigger framed, got a lot of muscle, and that's my build. And I was annoying her. I was like, oh, I want to go. It was and she, God love her, they come across there was a come and try day, and she said, oh, we should definitely go. And so we did. And as soon as I had a go, I was completely hooked, and she never went again. So she did that. She did that for me, which was really, really sweet of her, just to make sure that I actually went. So yeah. So
That's a good
started
friend.
from there. Yeah, she's a good friend.
So how did you, or what made you get interested in the competitive aspect? Because, you know, it's one thing doing something as a hobby, but to do something at a level where, you know, you're committing training and competing, and, you know, there's a lot involved with that.
God, why did I do that? Far out. So down, certainly at our velodrome, down in Midvale, they used to have Friday night racing, most Fridays, and I was kind of, I didn't know at the time. I think they were lining me up, actually. I didn't know. But I just, because I loved it so much. And so I started out just in the local racing on the Friday night, and they would do these handicap races. So being, you know, velodrome being one great big oval, you know, they'd start me all the way at the back, and then there'd be people so far in front of me, they were behind me, you know,
Yeah.
and then it was my job to hunt them down. And that's what I did, you know. So I literally went from doing Friday night racing locally to going to a national championships. I hadn't raced states or anything. I just went straight to national. I had no idea what I was doing. Absolutely no idea. But I think that's part of, again, in hindsight, I can't even believe I did that. I didn't even know how to change steers. You know, it was crazy. And I was like, I'm definitely going to go. But I don't know. I'm happy to do. Sometimes I just do things which are completely off the wall, and that was one of them. Yeah, it was a great experience, and I think now some of the anxiety that my anxiety, you know, you get nervous before you race now, and at that time, because I knew nothing, I wasn't even nervous. You know what I mean? It's one of those things. It's
Ignorance is bliss.
It is. That's absolutely it. Summed up nicely. Thank you. So it's carried on from there.
Oh, that's crazy. And yeah, so how do you juggle the amount of training required for cycling at a competitive level with what you do, especially with having to go out on site from time to time?
So out at the MRO, it's pretty cool actually. So there's, at the moment it's a donga based setup, and there's a donga that's actually a gym. So I can still do predominantly a lot of sprint work is actually attached to doing a lot of gym work. So that's fun. So I can still lift weights out there, but also they bought a bunch of mountain bikes, and they're pretty good quality ones as well. So
nice.
When you go out and you stay there, you'll catch me doing, you know, burning out up and down the runway, the airstrip. I'll get up first thing in the morning when the sun comes up before it gets too hot, and you just go out there and you just do boglats up and down. So you can still get the training in. You just have to adapt. You know, I think that's the difference with being an adult athlete. You just got to find a way. Like if you have a desire to stay at that level, you just have to find a way. So I'm pretty lucky. I've got obviously with lockdown, I had a lot of time at home, and I've got the ability to train here at home. I might ride my bike to work and incorporate some training into that, or a lot of nighttime training. You just got to figure it out. We've all got the same 24 hours a day, so it is
brilliant.
tiring.
Well, you've got the dedication for it, and clearly, you've got the accolades for it too. So it's definitely worth it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's sometimes when I talk about it in this context, I wonder why I do it as well. I do love it. So to be fair, with lockdown, the velodrome was closed for months, and I was relegated to riding on the road, which is still nice. It's lovely to be outside. But when I first went back, it was really nice to have it reaffirmed that I actually do really enjoy the sport. So when you have that enforced break, it's nice to be able to go back and say, yeah, you know what, this is actually pretty cool. It actually is fun. And that's fine. So the day that the fun's not there and the enjoyment's not there, I'm not going to do it anymore. It's really that simple.
So now that you've got your world champion and your record holding, where do you go from there?
Dang, I don't know. It's a wonderful achievement, and it's I had that pop up actually in my Facebook memories came up just recently because it was October that happened, and you get to relive that sense of achievement all over again. Where to from here? There's literally there isn't anything more that you can do. That you spend an entire year, slogging your guts out, for up to 16 hours a week to go and ride for, 20 seconds. That's what so that's so to actually come away with that as an achievement is pretty special. You can't top it. Is this the reality of it? But it gets to a point where it's actually now no longer about the outcome. Like if I've had many competitions now where I've not come away with a medal around my neck, and I'm actually, but yet still managed to be really proud of myself because the performance I put in was what I had hoped to achieve. So, and the thing is, you can never guarantee or be assured of who else is going to turn up. You just don't know who's going to be there on the day. And a lot has to go your way for it to be that as an outcome. So to go in with, winning as a desire or a required outcome, you're just going to come away disappointed. So yeah, I don't know. The competition is as much about personal achievement as it is about, being up on the blocks at the end. So.
I mean, the fact that you're able to get to compete at that level, whether or not
Sure.
you win, that's still amazing. That's still an incredible achievement each time.
Thank you. It's taken years to not rebut that. Yes, thank you. That's kind of you to say.
Yeah, your achievements deserve to be celebrated.
Thanks, Shell. Blushes awkwardly. Yeah, thank you.
It's okay. Okay, we'll move on then. So, which childhood book holds the strongest memories for you?
I think
it can be an embarrassing one if you
want. No, it's okay because I've actually got two. So it's from different stages in my childhood. When I was quite young, Dr. Seuss books for sure, 100% was completely captured by Dr. Seuss. In actual fact, I still have a copy of every single Dr. Seuss book now, which I went and purchased a couple of years. They're fantastic. Like even now to read them as an adult, some of the advice in those are really, really pretty cool. But the other one I'd have to say is, do you remember Choose Your Own Adventure?
Yes.
Do you remember those books? Yeah. Any of those. I was completely obsessed with those from about the age of about 10. I thought they were amazing.
Nice. Did you ever try to mulligan them just to try and get different outcomes?
Of course, yeah. And to the point where as a child you do pointless things like actually try and read it from page to page just to see and that doesn't work either. Can confirm does not work. But sure, but that was the beauty of it, yeah. So you try and give yourself a different way through each time. It was neat. Yeah. I don't know what happened to those. I don't even know if they still exist. They should. They were cool.
Yeah, they should exist. I haven't seen them in ages. Yeah, definitely good ones.
You're making me sound so old.
No. Come on.
I'm teasing. It's all good.
Yes. Not old at all. And finally, what advice would you give someone who would like to do what you do? Or what advice should they ignore?
I am a strong believer in that no one can ultimately tell you who you should be or how you should be. And I wish now, obviously through our teen angst years, that everyone's going to have their own journey. But certainly through my late 20s and into my 30s, I had this idea like I had to be a particular way if I was ever going to be successful. And I kind of realized, had an epiphany where I realized that there's actually people in the world who actually like and enjoy me for who I am as the real me, not for who I think that they want me to be. So 100%, no matter what you do, you got to be true to yourself. Ultimately, if they don't like you, they're not even worth it. That's the truth of it. You don't want those people in your life. They're just going to make you live your life with anxiety and stress you just don't need. So bugger
Yes,
them.
that's excellent advice.
Thanks. So yeah, doing what I do. I mean, just follow your follow the leads, follow your nose, do what you want to do. I think certainly, and when we start talking about STEM or STEAM in this case, some of those hot items that I think will become absolutely critical will be the gamers. It's that skill set is highly transferable now. So if you're out there and you're coding or you're gaming or you're doing all of those things now, I mean, the applications for those certainly in the science realm and engineering as well, highly transferable. So please don't stop. And especially for the young girls, for the teenage girls, if they're into that kind of stuff, don't stop. No matter what, because those skill sets are the future of where we need to get to moving forward, especially in engineering and science.
And yeah, it's a lot of the things I think now you getting a lot more girls getting interested in sort of things and wanting to know more and trying to figure out more. And it's just making sure that they know that there's people like you, there's people like all of the other people doing their thing in their own way, and making sure
Absolutely.
people find their own way.
Absolutely. It's all you can do. It's your life. You only get one shot, as far as we know.
Yes, definitely. Gotta just go for it.
Yeah, indeed. You got it.
Great. So, thank you so much, Rebecca, for speaking with me today about the SKA, how you got there, and your incredible achievement in cycling. If people want to learn more about you and what you do, how can they reach out?
I think probably the easiest way to connect with me would be through LinkedIn. My name, Rebecca Wheadon. I'm not that difficult to find. Or obviously being attached to CSIRO, feel free to hit up CSIRO on. They've got an awesome Insta account. If you're not following CSIRO on Insta, whoever writes some of that stuff, they're very, very cool. And Twitter, of course, CSIRO. And if you're here in WA, feel free to reach out. And I'm happy to anyone who wants to have a chat. Feel free. It's fine.
Brilliant. Well, thank you again so much for speaking to me today.
Pleasure.
And it was great meeting George a couple of times he wandered by.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Got to have extra special guests. And thank you so much and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Shell. Cheers.
Learning about the Square Kilometre Array and the magnitude of the logistics and infrastructure required for it, not to mention the science and engineering involved, is mind-blowing. And it's been fascinating to hear about Rebecca's experiences working with and managing her part of a project of this scale. Endeavours like the SKA are simply incredible, not just for their size, but because of the potential for innovation and discovery during the course of its development, as well as when it becomes operational. To learn more about Rebecca and what we discuss on this show, or to connect with us, please visit the Steam Powered website at steampoweredshow.com. You can also reach out to Rebecca on LinkedIn and find out more about the SKA Telescope on their public website and through CSIRO, the links of which will also be in the show notes. If you enjoyed this conversation, please let me know. Subscribe to this channel, leave a comment below, and share this with your geeky and geek-curious friends. You can also support Steam Powered on Patreon and Ko-fi under Steam Powered Show, the links for which will be in the show notes. Thanks for watching!